Hello everybody, it is LMG here, and I've got a bit of a video essay style for you today. I was perusing YouTube as I do, and I stumbled across this video by H Puzzle called There Is No Phyrexian Deck. As your local Phyrexian advocate, I believe this video, while in good concept, was poorly mistaken in its actual key points. Now, in the video, he comes with the accusations that Phyrexians just do the color pie and aren't unique. They've got way too many mechanics to be cohesive, and typal/tribal decks, whichever you prefer. Cards call it tribal, but then now we're calling it typal. I don't know. Political correctness aside, all Phyrexians is just unviable and incohesive. Now, sit down for a spell as I turn into Uncle Iroh and I teach you about the Phyrexian color pie and why Phyrexians are much better than you think. So, you'll notice as you look at any sort of Phyrexian card that it is always Phyrexian something. Phyrexia as a whole started in the story as animals, creatures, people, whatever, being infected by ichor oil. Matter of fact, there are only 3 cards in the entire game who are just pure Phyrexians. One's a pile of weird stuff, one's an incubator pod that's alive, and one is, yeah, I'll be real honest with you, I don't know what Essence of Orthodoxy is supposed to be, but it definitely looks like it's not actually a thing. These 3 creatures all give off the vibes of like they would be a Phyrexian goo equivalent of an artifact. Like if an artifact, instead of being like a metallic little object, was made out of flesh and ooze. So, with that being said, each of the colors in Phyrexian creatures are essentially harsh versions of the color pie. And there's no better place to look at that than the Praetor section. Each Praetor, and we'll go through all of them and all 3 of their iterations, or all 5.5 of them, or Bresk die, each of their iterations and what they do in comparison to the color pie. So, in green, first we have Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add mana. When an opponent taps land, it doesn't untap. This guy is just Nyxbloom Ancient, but you're also depriving your opponent of their lands. Not only are you buffing and making yourself stronger, you are actively harming the opponent while doing it. Vorinclex Monsters Raider is just doubling season with legs, but also makes it so your opponents don't get those counters anymore. Obviously, you don't get tokens with Vorinclex, but that aside, you're trading off the tokens part for a body and stopping your opponents from playing around with 1/1 counters. March of the Machine Vorinclex. It just seems kind of questionable at first when you read it. It's just a big body with a really expensive effect that lets you tutor lands, and it's kind of just Nisa's Triumph. But when you flip Vorinclex, the Grand Evolution takes Straw from Green Sun's Twilight, Biogenic Upgrades, and Plukernos Unchained, because suddenly you're doing everything that a lot of green cards like to do. You're cheating creatures in for free, you're putting 1/1 counters everywhere, and you're fighting things. Those are all things that green does, pumped up to 11 in a saga. Now, this is why I say that each Phyrexian color is just everything you know about the color pie, but ramped up to extreme measures. The Phyrexians are all about progress and completion without holdback. They only care about progress. They don't care about ethics. They don't care about people. They don't care about each other. You find that out during March of the Machines. Several of the Praetors get killed by Norn. for the cause. Some great examples, too, of just Phyrexian creatures that do this. Birthing Pod. Only the strongest will survive. You sacrifice the weak to get the strong. Bloated Contaminator, it's a 3-drop that's also got Trample, it's also got Toxic, we'll get into that. And it proliferates. You're getting so much bang for your buck, where normally green's just, yeah, you get above rate creature, whatever. This is just whole nother level. Same thing with Tyrannix Rex. Trample, Ward 4, Haste, this spell can't be countered, Toxic 4, 8/8 body. Everything about that screams green, but oh holy shit, someone's gonna try to blow this up. Got green? Okay, here's where we're going. Black. First we have Sheoldred Whispering One. At the beginning of your upkeep, return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. On the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, they sack a creature. This is just sticking Reanimate and a sack creature card on the same body, repeating every turn. It's also got Swamp Walk. You'll notice it's an older card. Swamp Walk was a lot more viable back then. It still is, but they don't print it anymore. Sheoldred the Apocalypse, the $800 bullshit. When you draw a card, you gain life. When an opponent draws a card, they lose life. You're benefiting, they're losing, you're forcing Read the Bones on all of their draws. You're gaining life from your draws. You're gaining value by ripping that value away from your opponent. Flippy Sheoldred is just Fleshbag Marauder, but except for yourself. You don't have to sacrifice a creature, just everybody else. But again, when it flips, it turns into like a love letter to the color black. Because it's a kill, it's Hero's Downfall, destroy a creature or planeswalker. Discard 3 cards, mill 3 cards, you're griefing them, and then put all creatures from the from graveyards to the battlefield. You just command the Dread Horde. Each flipping Phyrexian is a love letter to the color, and all of the extremes just bundled into one. And that's what Phyrexia is. Phyrexia, again, is just color, ramped up to 11, no holds barred, gimme your kidneys. So, Black also has Gix. Now, Gix was the first Praetor. He's the honorary Praetor. You know, Gix, the guy who corrupted Mishra and really pissed off Urza. I don't know, half of the kids nowadays who play Magic don't even remember who Urza and Mishra are. So, yeah. Now, Gix is essentially just Phyrexian Arena on legs, but beating people to death with it. And then also stealing cards from their library and casting it. Sounds like very swamp magic thing to do. After that, though, some good examples. Phyrexian Obliterator makes your opponent sack creatures for doing things to you. Archfiend of the Dross, bleed them dry for creatures dying. Ignore that part about losing if you have no oil counters on it. And Crick is all about using your life as a resource and making things cheaper, making itself bigger. Everything that Black does, ramped up to 11. Sound good? Okay, as long as we're keeping up. We got White. White is the color of control and unity, and that's why Norn became the leader. Now, Elish Norn herself, other creatures get +2/+2, and creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. This is just Glorious Anthem on steroids for your creatures, while actively taking away Anthem from your opponent's creatures. This is White if White stopped worrying about being fair. The Phyrexians are some of the only White cards in the game who don't have equivalent exchange or trade-off. White either does something but in return have this, or White will punish you for doing something to me. White is reactive and White is fair. Phyrexia says, nah, fuck that. Fuck you, I'm getting all the rewards. Case in point, Elish Norn Mother of Machines. Your ETBs, which White has a ton of, you get double of those. Your opponents? Nah, fuck them. They don't get any. No ETBs for them. This is just, again, white doesn't itself have a ETB doubler. It usually just uses Panharmonicon, but there's tons of white cards that do things on ETB. And Norn just ramps that up twice as much. And then we have Flipping Norn, which, when a source opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, they lose 2 life unless they pay taxes. And by sacking creatures, you flip it. Right? This is just Ghostly Prison or Smothering Tithe duct taped to yourself and says, no, don't touch me or pay taxes. Now, when you flip it, the Argent Etchings is making tokens, white does that, giving an Anthem effect and Double Strike to your creatures, and then blowing the fuck up out of everything that's not a land, artifact, or Phyrexian. A lot of people think of black when they think of original board wipe, but Wrath of God is like the board wipe. So it totally makes sense for white's Phyrexian bullshit to just blow the board to smithereens. Alright, so I'm not a fan of taxes. This feels kind of gross being here. Let's go over some creatures. Phyrexian Vindicator. Oh, you're gonna swing at me? Uno reverse card, Magical Cylinder, it's going back into your face. Stacks pieces. You want to cast things that aren't Phyrexians? You only get 1 a turn, and it comes in tapped. And here, let's make some more tokens while we're at it. Just for whenever something transforms, or whenever you target something, or, because it's Tuesday. Let's just make tokens. Punishment, stacks, tokens. That's white. And God, I hate it here. Let's get off the white plane. Refreshing. The blue plane. Home of creativity and card draw and magic and wizardry. And oh, what's that? Yeah, we like cards. I'm gonna draw 7 cards every single turn. Oh, but you? No. Your max hand size is now 0. Dump your hand at the end of the turn, buddy. This is just stroke of genius on a creature that says no. My opponents? No. They don't get to have a hand. No. There's a reason that Jin is the single most expensive raider at 10 mana for a 5/4, but that busted ass ability alone makes him one of the best. You've got Progress Tyrant. I like casting instant sorceries and artifacts. I'm going to do that twice as much. Oh, but my opponents want to try to blow up my Jinga Taxis. I'm going to counter their spell. Copying spells, countering spells. That's just everything that blue does, but completely unfairly and ramped up to 11. Lastly, we have Flipping Jin, which has Ward 2. Before they started handing Ward out to literally every single legendary card they could get their hands on. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, a 3 or greater, draw a card. And then the flip effect. This is just, Spell Slinger, Draw Engine, go burn. One thing you'll notice, too, about the flipping Praetors is you have to meet a requirement for all but Vorinclex to flip over. Vorinclex's requirement is you having 8 mana. Childred's is having X amount of creatures in graveyards. Norn, you have to sacrifice creatures. And Jin, you have to have 7 cards. You have to have a grip in your hand. And we'll get to Stinky Urbrask in a second. These are all things that the colors themselves do. Green ramps really fast, black kills things, puts them in the graveyard, white makes tokens, blue draws cards. They're easy to fulfill as long as you're playing the colors as they do. So when you can flip Jin, you get greeted with one of the most ludicrously awful things to see. So you get Seagate Restoration, just double your hand size, no more max hand size for the rest of the game. Cyclonic Rift, except it's for specifically just non-Phyrexians. And then omniscience for a turn when you have like at least 18 card hand. What the fuck? Yeah, so the blue Phyrexians are all about just advantage and keeping your opponent in the dirt. Like 6 turns behind you in the Stone Age Unga Bunga style. Some great things to note about blue. Blue has a lot of proliferate. We'll get to proliferate in the explanation of mechanics, but just know Phyrexians used to be the only things that would proliferate. A lot of draw cards, discard card type deals, artifacts, synergy, and you know they gotta have some clones. It's blue. Every artifact that's worth its salt in blue has clones. It just happens. I am playing Pot of Greed to draw 50 cards from my deck, and I'm gonna need them to survive Urbrask's Hellhole. So I don't like being here. I'm sorry. I need to cut the music. I am an Atraxa player. I like the 4 colors. Urbrask is a filthy heretic. Lore-wise, I don't like Urbrask. Creature card design, I don't like red to begin with. Red's my least favorite color. Just even before I picked up Phyrexians, never liked red. Let's get off this plane as fast as we can. So, Urbrask the Hidden. Your creatures come in with haste. Oh, but your opponents, no. They gotta come in tapped. Not only do you get instant attacks, but your opponents don't get blockers for a turn. This is very obviously just one-sided anger in combination with, like, Authority of the Consuls from White. Red doesn't normally get this effect, so the fact that Urbrask comes out swinging with Go Fuck Yourself, just all around good. Urbrask Heretic Praetor, see what I did there? At the beginning of your upkeep, not your draw step, upkeep, exile the top card of your library you can play at this turn. But, so you get to exile a card to play, and then also just regularly draw a card. Seems good. Oh, but your opponents, they don't get to just draw cards. They have to impulse draw. They can play it on their turn. They don't get to stock their hand anymore. This stops you from draw step drawing. Unless you've got other means to draw cards, you're not getting any more cards to hand for the game. This is obviously just, like I said, impulse draw. It's active impulse. Everyone knows this card. Impulse draw is red's thing, and this just forces impulse draw to every other card type. It says, we have to deal with impulse draw, now so do you. Urbrask the Flippy Boy. When you cast an instant or sorcery, it deals 1 damage to an opponent, and you get a red. This is totally just Firebrand Archer, which I know this came after Urbrask, but there's 80 bajillion cards like Firebrand Archer. Urbrask, flip side Urbrask, is kinda gross, because if you just have a bunch of red spells that cost 1 and they say, hey, do something, and then draw a card, you can just sort of like shoot someone in the face for like 30 damage, assuming you don't draw lands. If you just keep drawing gas, you can just keep burning people. And that's why he has the cheapest but hardest to fulfill flip. For 1 red, you can flip him over, but only if you've cast 3 or more instants or sorceries. Now when you flip him, 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. Slag Storm, create 3 treasures, and then you get to cast instants and sorceries from your graveyard for the turn. This is just... And then it flips back over on the same turn, too, so you can just redo all of that burn that you just put someone through before you flipped over Urbrask. This card's scary when you can actually get it to go off. So, that's Urbrask. What about his creatures? Well, you got dragons, you got goblins, and spell slinger shenanigans. Fuck this. We're getting out of here. Fuck you, Urbrask. Okay, we're back. No more red. No more none of that. Fucking Urbrask. we got to talk next about our friend's second point here, that there are too many effects on cards and they don't synergize well. Now, there are a lot of effects in the Phyrexian archetype. There's technically 9, some of them kind of fit together. But I'm going to ask you this, right? We're going to go through this, and I'm going to have you keep in mind, do any of these effects at all step on each other's toes or stop them from playing side by side? Because I'm going to tell you the answer right now is no. Quite a few of these interact with each other in a pretty good way, too. So, the first one we had was Infect, which is, everyone hates Infect, and there's a reason it's never came back. So, you deal damage in the form of poison counters, and neg1 counters to creatures. Everyone knows, 10 poison counters, oops, you're dead. This shit was the original Phyrexian, ooh, got your nose. You cast Phyresis, the act of Phyrexianizing a creature, and it gains Infect. Toxic was Wizards of the Coast going, man, we really fucked up and people hate Infect. Let's make Infect slightly less awful. They also created Withering. They split Infect in half, into Toxic and Withering. Withering is not here on this list. It's not a Phyrexian thing. Not important. But Toxic is, if it hits you, regardless of how much damage they take, instead of replacing the damage, they still take health damage, but they also gain poison counters equal to the Toxic on the creature. Okay? One or the other. Obviously, Infect's arguably better than Toxic. There's certain conditions where Toxic would be better. But they can be ran side by side. No problem, no sweat. You want to play poison counters, you want to murder somebody, just be an asshole, go for it. Nothing stopping you from running Infect and Toxic. We then get to the Toxic support effect, Corrupted. And it's if they have, I think it's always 3 or more poison counters, you get an effect. Again, this doesn't step on any toes of the previous 2. You know, just because you're running Toxic or Infect, that fuels Corrupted, right? So, you're with me so far? You can stick these 3 in a deck, no problem. We got Proliferate. After War of the Spark, like our friend we're replying to here has said, other creatures started getting Proliferate. Proliferate was a Phyrexian exclusive, and for a good reason, too. Proliferate is so strong, and Atraxa is one of the single most played commanders in all of EDH for the simple reason of perpetual constant proliferate and just how toolboxy that can be. There are so many things and so many reasons to proliferate that I can't even make a video on all of the styles of Atraxa. I'll try at some point to talk about why Atraxa is so popular, but that is not this video, right? But still, Proliferate doesn't step on any toes we've had so far. In fact, it buffs them. You want to stick an extra poison counter on someone at the end of your turn? Go for it. We have Phyrexian Mana down here with Crick. Phyrexian Mana just says, your life is a resource, make mana with it instead. Again, while that doesn't synergize totally with any of the previous things before, that's just good. It's just great to, instead of having to pay an extra mana, you know, pay 6 life, get Crick on turn 4 instead of 7. Sounds good. We had Completed, which is the Phyrexian mana symbols on a Planeswalker, which sort of just balanced the whole getting shit early by making it so if you do, you get less loyalty counters. It's a balancing thing. This is another repeat of Infect to Toxic. A lot of cards with Phyrexian mana symbols got banned, like Birthing Pod and Gitaxian Probe, because they were good. So they said a lot of Planeswalkers get completed in March of the Machines and all will be one. So in order to stop you from just cheating out a Planeswalker super early and being super powerful, you lose your loyalty counters by doing so. It's a trade-off, and that's fair. Again, this doesn't interfere with any of the previous mechanics, doesn't step on any toes. It's just good. It's viable. Incubate was fresh from March of the Machines, and I already want it back. So Incubate makes incubator tokens. The whole idea of Phyrexianizing is taking a creature, shoving it in an infect pod, and it pops out a Phyrexian. So there's all these creatures that will make an artifact with 1/1 counters on it that you can pay to pop the bubble and get that creature later. You can keep them stocked up in the back to have reinforcements post-board wipe. You can just when you think your opponent's safe and they don't have enough blockers, but they're like, okay, I don't have to do anything, he can't kill me this turn, suddenly you have 4 more creatures out of nowhere to swing at them. And while they don't play off of Toxic and Infect, they do work incredibly well with Proliferate, because you can just keep increasing the amount of 1/1 counters on them. It's also worth mentioning, too, that the completed Planeswalkers, and just Planeswalkers in general, attracts a Super Friends synergy. Yeah? Yeah, okay. Lastly, of the mechanics that I'll acknowledge, we had the Phyrexian transformations, which were just creatures that you could pay mana and a Phyrexian mana to flip and transform it. It was the transform mechanic on demand by paying mana and sometimes life. Doesn't interfere, doesn't block you from playing the Infect, Toxic, anything like that. There's no negatives, right? Now I will admit, I can't defend oil counters. They themselves don't do anything. And it's not necessarily that oil counters are bad, but the cards that use oil counters rely on oil counters, and oil counters are nothing burger counters. Sure, you can proliferate them and get things going easier. Yeah, okay. Oil counters as a whole are it's a tracking mechanic. They themselves do literally nothing. You put a oil counter on a creature that doesn't have anything to do with it, it does nothing. Doesn't do anything. Unfortunately, most of the cards that were printed with oil counters were pretty bad. These on the screen are some of the better ones, and even then, reading them, really? You lose the game? I cannot defend oil counters. Yeah. Go into a pit with Urbrask. Now, I touched on this a little bit earlier with the whole Color Pie thing and the Praetors. I want to go over 2 cycles of cards similar to the Praetors that exemplify this even further. The first one is the Dominus squad. And all of these just say, hey, that thing that the color we're in, double it and give it to the next person. And also remove some of those things from what you just did. Make us indestructible. Zop and Drill, green creatures are big. Now they're twice as big. And set creatures make Zop indestructible. Tekuthal, blue loves counters on things. And blue at the time was also like the big proliferate color. Remove some counters, make me invincible. Red is known for burn. Double your burn, give it to the next guy. White likes tokens. Sack some tokens. Indestructible. Black kills things. Dying triggers doubled. Exile cards from a graveyard. Indestructible. The Dominus creatures are very strong, and they exemplify the Praetors. They're supposed to be like the Praetor's right-hand man type deal. Then we have the Defiler archetype. Now these allow you to essentially create Phyrexian mana outside of where you should for 1 symbol. Each one of them has the single most common keyword on them for the color. Trample, flying, first strike, menace, vigilance. You know where it's going. Green rewards you for playing green permanents by putting 1/1s on your counters. Blue permanent, draw a card. Red permanent, burn. Red's a little awkward because really you want to be burning people with instants and sorceries, but I digress. Urbrask is a filthy heretic and designs his cards terribly. White, make tokens. Black, give something a temporary buff and menace. I'd say those are pretty good. There's this dirty little fucker who thinks he can sneak in here, but I promise you he's not a Phyrexian. He has nothing to do with the Defiler archetype. Get your bitch out of here before I annihilate you. Now, the last point that our friend made is that there are no cohesive Phyrexian decks, or tribal, whatever the hell you want to call it, decks. And I have to completely disagree. He even goes over one of these very strong white, green, black decks in Standard, right? And Standard, sure, whatever. But aside from, like, Elf Ball and, I guess, Goblins, most tribal decks don't do a lot in Standard, Modern, anything like that. So we need to turn to Commander. The most played format for a reason, I might add. Now, there are so many fucking decks you can build that are Phyrexian-based. Right, you've got Ovika. This one's one of my favorites. It's Spellslinger, but makes tokens. It's all about casting non-creatures, and then you get tokens. Make a bunch of goblins, make a Myrrh and turn them all into those goblins, whatever. Incubator. Fits right at home in here. You got Atraxa, Proliferate, go Burr. Again, incubate on casting Phyrexians. And rewards for proliferating, for drawing a card. You got Glissa, which is making eggs. Incubate eggs. Just eggs fucking everywhere. Free advantage from just letting turns go by. You have Ixel, which is the deck I was just discussing with the Toxic. This is your Infect deck. If you feel like playing Infect, you're in these colors. You got Skittles, you got Vizras, you got Skrelv, Ixel. I built an entire deck around this Azuri and made an entire video about it. If you haven't seen it, please, by all means, go watch. This guy, really cool, really unique. Tiny Timmy gets a poop knife, is the summary of this deck, essentially. And even aside from the decks I've just listed, Phyrexians as a whole are just big multi-tools. Like, you look at Massacre Worm. Someone's got, like, a go-wide strategy. They got 86 1/1s and they're about to swing in your face. Uno reverse card. They all die and you're dead. Glissa? If you let Glissa touch you, which, mind you, she has a literal javelin covered in shit, for first strike with Death Touch, and if you let her hit you instead of sacrificing one of your creatures to Jimmy with a poop knife, you can draw a card, you can destroy an enchantment, or you can remove counters from a permanent. What? There are like 5 fucking cards in all of Magic that let you remove counters from something, and Glissa's one of them. And I made a back alley Magic about Cankerbloom. Also go watch that one if you haven't. It's just a big multi-tool with an above-average body. Like, just good shit. And there's even so many more cards for decks that I haven't gone over because I have not built them. Ellis, Rhea, and Bladewing, they're all just good cards. They're all just... There are so many possibilities in Phyrexian that you haven't explored. And I guarantee you that if you've made it this far into the video, to the end, I truly ask you to go look at the almost 500 Phyrexian cards we have in the database and just try to pick one, build around it. I guarantee you, you will become one. Phyrexians are some of the strongest creatures that just get splashed into decks because they're strong. But when you build Phyrexians just as a deck, it just feels like good stuffs. And I encourage you to try it. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and to our good friend who made the video about not having a Phyrexian deck, I hope you've learned something, and I hope you watch this video. Because I truly do believe, with no hate and no shade, that you are just mistaken. Thank you, and have a good night.